What's going on, guys? So today we are here. We're going to discuss the latest nerfs and buffs that just dropped today. So it's going to be an interesting video, and I'm going to also release some speculations because if you guys noticed, they said balance update number 1. So it looks to me like they are going to be doing some more in the future, smaller updates here and there where the meta seems to be kind of going one direction. So if there's something that's overtaking the meta, my guess is they're going to start putting corrections in as we progress. So I anticipate several more updates here in the future. But first, let's talk about this first one that we saw today. So I'm going to pull up the first card here that did get changed. Let's see if I even have it. Ooh, let's change my archetype here. Do I have this card? I think I do. There it is. Heat Death of the Universe. So this card was nerfed. I would say it's definitely a nerf. So it went from doing -3 energy this round, and your cards, wherever they are, with 4 or less energy cost +3 this round. They changed it to now, as you can see, say your cards with 7 or more base energy cost -2 for 2 turns, wherever they are with and then wherever they are with 4 or less base energy cost +2 for 2 turns. So definitely a nerf. This card was doing -3 energy basically for 3 turns if you drew it on round 1 or on turn 1 of the round. So the fact that now it only affects for 2 turns and it's only reducing by 2 instead of 3, that is a huge buff to the upper echelon of decks out there. Sorry about that. Getting tongue-tied up here. But yes, I think this card is definitely going to affect those Planet X decks, those decks in the higher energy weeks that want to stuff tons of big, expensive cards into their deck and then get that discount off of Heat Death. Or it doesn't even have to be super high energy week. You can do that on a lower energy week. Heat Death was really knocking big chunks of energy off the cost of those cards to where you could do some massive turns for very little cost. So I think it was a good change overall. You probably won't see Heat Death played as much, so I think it will hurt some of those upper decks quite a bit. But I think overall, I think that was a good change. Let's go look at the other ones here. So it looks like not only did they target that deck specifically, one of those top tier decks, they also targeted drain or inflation taxing decks. So here's one of the cards that did see a nerf today. King Midas previously said, when drawing, your opponent's legendary cards in hand cost +3 energy for 3 turns. So now it only does +2 energy for 3 turns. So significant nerf there. So definitely trying to pull those taxing effects down just a little bit, right? It's very painful when you go up against those type of decks, especially in like casual format where you're very limited on your 7 energy that you start with, to be taxed potentially your whole hand +2 energy for 3 turns is just complete backbreaking where you almost can't even play any cards. So targeting decks that just aren't fun to play against is what it looks like they're doing. So I think a target to King Midas specifically, again, is targeting a deck that is not very fun for people to play against, but I want to say the inflation or tax decks in general, I think are definitely needed in the format because you want to keep those top tier decks at bay, and the best way to do that to keep people from just jamming all the best cards in their deck that are 8, 9, 10 energy costed cards is to have these tax decks because it makes it to where they can only play 2 cards a turn instead of 3, right? So they're not able to do as much. So this archetype basically just keeps those other decks in check, right? Same thing with tiny decks. They combat certain archetypes as well. So there's definitely a little circle of how this works here. All right, so moving on, another target we have against taxing decks we saw is Crooked Forest. So this card also got chopped today. So it says Previously said, when returned, if your deck has 4 or more tremendous tree cards, your opponent's legendary cards, wherever they are, cost +2 energy for 5 turns. So now it is +3 energy for 3 turns. So definitely took a hit. The additional turns, where we had 5 turns, was definitely more impactful, I would say. But yeah, now it's specifically just 3 energy for 3 turns. But your deck also only needs now 3 tremendous tree cards instead of 4. So that's interesting that they made that adjustment there. I don't know why the dropping down from 3 to 4 matters as much. I could see if it was 2, because then you could have the combo of General Sherman and Douglas Fir, because this isn't a tree itself. But I'm trying to think if 3 makes... Maybe just... Oh, I know. I bet you it's for World Turtle decks. Potentially. I don't know. Interesting. I have to think on that one more, why the 3 to 4 makes a difference. Now, a card I do want to talk about getting a buff here that we saw, at least I think it's a buff, is Zhang Yi Sao. Now, I did a video a while back where I had this card, and I attempted making a Pirates deck, and I think I told you guys that I cut this card out because it just didn't work, right? This card here required 9 Plundering Pirates originally until the change now to 8. But Whirly here, where's he at? Do I have Whirly? Whirly. Am I spelling it right? Let's go to the Pirates real quick. Show you what I'm talking about here. So I was surprised they caught this because I had mentioned it several times, and then they made the change. So I was very surprised. Let's see. Richard Whirly, here he is. This card said if your deck has exactly 8 Plundering Pirates, your Plundering Pirates, wherever they are, gain +8 permanently. So you couldn't have this card in your deck at the same time as Zhang Yi Sao, or however you say his name. So because he required 9 at the time, if your deck has 9 or more is what he used to say, so it just didn't work out with that card there. So it really made sense that they changed this down to 8. So now you can put this card in your deck along with Richard Whirly in it, and you won't have that issue any longer. You'll be getting the +8 on your Pirates here, and then you'll be getting now the additional buff from Zhang with your Riding Wave cards and Plundering Pirates. So going to be some good stat lines there that we can now take advantage of. So definitely go try that out. I think it's going to be worth your while. All right, so the next up, we have another nerf to Immortals, guys. So they are definitely wanting that deck brought down a peg by the looks of it. So as we know, if you're in the lower tier, I keep saying it wrong. If you're in the lower tiers anyway, Immortals is really all you go up against, it seems like. So we did have a nerf to Lu Dongbing. He now says your Chinese folklore cards, wherever they are, get that +10 until played. And when returned, for every 8 Immortal cards you've played this game, up to a maximum of 10, this card gains +10 until played. So before, we didn't have that maximum 10 cap. So that cap now basically limits what this card is going to do, right? So the rest is the same, but we do have that maximum of 10 now. So he's only going to be able to get so big. He's not going to keep growing and growing and growing any longer. Let's see. And what else do we have? We have the last nerf of the day, Zhang Gulao. He previously said, when played, if your deck contains all 8 Immortals, give your 8 Immortal cards +14 permanently. Well, as you can see, it now says +10 permanently. So definitely it took some power off of the Immortals deck right there. That's a pretty big hit to the permanent power. So I think that will definitely hurt in the long run for Immortals. Might not be as viable as it once was. Have yet to try it out. I'll probably try it out here shortly. But like I said, guys, they are going to be putting out several more updates in the future. So I want to talk about what I think they might target next. So you guys know I love doing these speculation type videos of my thoughts and what I think and what I see in the meta. So I think right now we see, especially in the lower energy weeks, we see a lot of tiny decks. At least that's like all I played against last week, it felt like, almost every single game. So I would expect to see some type of nerf to tiny. And what I would go for personally is probably this Frilled Dragon. So when returned, your cards, wherever they are, with 1 or less base energy, that's almost the entire tiny deck, right? Aside from a couple cards. But I think I would knock this plus 22 until played down, especially since this card only costs 2 energy and it can target a huge part of your deck, right? I would suggest maybe knocking this down to plus 15 until played. I think that would be more reasonable and still a really significant buff, right? We saw Hygie come into the meta, and its buff is not that significant, and this card did make a huge impact. So this card right here says, when returned, your cards with 0 base energy get the plus 23 until played, and your cards with 1 base energy get plus 13 until played. So just that plus 13 there alone was enough to really make this deck super broken, right? So I think knocking Frill Dragon down a little bit, or even Hygie itself down, maybe you take this down to plus 10 until played, and then the 0 base energy, maybe we knock that down to, plus 18 or something, or plus 20. Maybe that would help with the tiny decks a little bit. So I would expect to see a nerf on tiny. I just don't know exactly what card, but I would target either this card or Frill Dragon personally. Next up, we see tons of Unruly Ruler decks right now, right, guys? I mean, if you're playing anywhere in the top tier decks, you have seen plenty of Unruly Ruler decks running around. So I would expect a nerf on Unruly Rulers. So there's a couple options. You could do Lionheart nerf, which we know, again, it's a new card, so I don't know that they would target a brand new card right out the gate. But this is what made Unruly Rulers great, right, guys? This plus 28 until played is huge. So I could see them going after this card, unless, again, like I said, just because it's a new drop, they want to wait on this card. But plus 28 is a lot, so maybe knocking this down a little bit, maybe just a plus 25, or maybe even down to plus 20. I think that would bring Unruly Rulers back a little bit. Wouldn't be as crazy as it is. So possibly this card, but again, it's just so new, maybe they don't want to mess with it yet, right? The other option would be to target, I don't know how to say this guy's name, but Uzia. When played, if your deck has exactly 10 Unruly Ruler cards, give them, wherever they are, plus 16 until played. So it's an extra 160 power they're going to get. So that's pretty strong. I could see knocking this down to plus 12. I think that would suffice and still be pretty impactful. So that could be something that gets targeted. I mean, it's not as crazy because it's a limited epic, but still I could see, if they didn't want to touch Lionheart yet, that would be an indirect way of kind of still affecting him, you know what I mean? The last option would be Ragnar Lodbrok. Did I say that right? Ragnar Lodbrok. When played, your Unruly Ruler cards, wherever they are, gain plus 25 until played. So that's a huge buff. And yeah, I would expect this card. This might actually be the card that gets targeted, because that's a huge buff for, your entire deck. So I'd knock this down to at least 20. Maybe even 18 would still be pretty decent, but I would expect we see something out of one of those 3 cards get targeted. Finally, what I like to do some buff speculation as well, so you guys know me. I'm just going to do one kind of an archetype that I think, and the archetype is the Robin Hood archetype. So you guys have seen, I think they released a couple Robin Hood cards recently, so they're definitely thinking about Robin Hood. But I honestly think Robin Hood himself needs a buff. So when you read this card, when played, your opponent's cards in hand with 80 or more base power lose 20 this turn, and your merry men, wherever they are, gain plus 20 perm. So the second part's fantastic, right? The plus 20 perm on your merry men's great, but the first part almost never triggers, right? And if you played Robin Hood, this almost never triggers. And if it does, it's very rare. It's got to be up against some real beefy decks. But lately, we've been playing it up against tiny decks. We've been playing up against stuff that does not have 80 base power. So I think this 80 base power needs to just go away. Just make it say your opponent's cards in hand lose 20 this turn. There's no reason to have this stipulation of 80 base power. It just makes this card definitely not as good. Like, think about cards like Hans. Hans basically does the same thing, but just way better. I mean, why wouldn't... The whole archetype is Robin Hood. Why wouldn't you want that card to be the best card in the deck? Like, don't make Maid Marian the best card in the deck when it's the Robin Hood deck. You know what I mean? Like, this makes no sense. But look at this card. This card says all cards in both players' hands lose 30 this turn, except Festive Traditions. So automatically it's not targeting itself. And most of the time if you're playing this card, you're playing multiple Festive Tradition cards. So really you're just hitting your opponent most of the time, right? So this card is way better than Robin Hood, right? So why not give Robin Hood a little buff? You want it to be the best card in that archetype, I would think. It's literally the Robin Hood archetype. Make this card awesome. Don't make it something people just glaze over and think it's terrible when it's, you want this card to shine, guys. Come on. Robin Hood. Rob from the rich, man. Maybe he, does something awesome. I don't know. But anyway, that's what I would target, is definitely give him a buff, right? I think that's definitely deserved and needed. So anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Nothing too crazy. Just wanted to go over basically the meta changes and what we saw today. So I think we're going to see a big shift away from 8 Immortals like we talked about, and they're definitely pushing these new archetypes. You can see up here above, we've got Bird's going to be a big... I think this is going to be really strong, especially a Bird in Flight. If you read that card, you're getting that plus 13 perm. That card is going to be super good in a Bird's deck. And we saw... What else did we see? We saw Prominent Painters getting a push. So I'll probably start doing some videos on these shortly. I just need to round up the cards, but I'll probably drop a Shark deck, a Bird deck, and a Prominent Painters deck here soon for you guys, and show off these 3 new, basically, archetypes that they're pushing up. So this is what they want you new players to be playing by the looks of it. So that's what we'll do. We'll try to make some decks on these. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, though, and as always, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. We are going to do a giveaway at 1,000 sub mark, so we're getting close. I'm only about, I think, 100 away or so. So definitely hit that button if you haven't yet, guys, and we'll be doing some limited legendary giveaways. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, have a good night.